Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Four Past Midnight. So this one is another compilation of novellas, much like Different Seasons, which we did a while ago. I don't know how many videos back that would have been, but I figured we'll do it the same way, where each novella gets its own video. So there will be 4 videos for Four Past Midnight. So this collection actually begins with a poem by Stephen Crane, and I have always loved the imagery. In the desert, I saw a creature, naked, bestial, who squatting upon the ground held his heart in his hands and ate of it. I said, "Is it good, friend?" "It is bitter, bitter," he answered, "but I like it, because it is bitter and because it is my heart." Because it is bitter and because it is my heart. I just love those lines. It's so eerie and so shocking, but good. Shocking in a good way. Alright, so we have the first novella, which is The Langoliers. I'm not a big fan of this one. It's okay. I don't know. It just... what I actually associate it with is I remember my parents watching it on TV, the made-for-TV movie, and I think it had Belky from Perfect Strangers in it. I don't remember his name. Something Bronson. Pinchal? I don't know. The guy who played Belky from Perfect Strangers. I don't know when the miniseries would have been made. Early 90s, I'm guessing, but I remember them watching it and it was kind of like, not interested. It has very few characters, mostly because it takes place on a plane, and then the people on the plane, a lot of them disappear. Our main protagonist is Brian Engel. He's a pilot. He flew into Los Angeles. Terrible, terrible flight. He gets a notification that his ex-wife has died and he needs to go to Boston for the funeral. So he immediately has to get on a plane and fly as a passenger to Boston. So this is flight 29, and he falls asleep because he's had such a long day, long flight, all that stuff. So he's asleep. At some point, everyone who was sleeping as this plane heads toward Boston, everyone who is not sleeping disappears. And it's because they went through a time rip, which is a theory later proposed in the novella. So we've got about 10 people, 10 characters, and there's a little blind girl, there's a woman who is going out to Boston to have a tryst, there's Brian, the pilot, Nick Hopewell, he is kind of like a foreign spy type person, a fixer. I don't know if you've watched Supernatural. I picture that he is kind of like Ketch. There's a guy who starts out being known only as Crewneck, and he's hostile and he needs to get to Boston. He's mad that he thinks that people are fucking him over, even though it's obviously a weird situation and it has nothing to do with a personal vendetta against him, but he is losing his marbles. We later find out that his name is Craig Toomey, but for a while they just kind of refer to him as Crewneck, and he is kind of on everyone's shit list because he is violent and prone to outbursts, and he is not a nice guy. We have 2 younger teens, Bethany and Albert. Then we've got a couple of nondescript men. Robert Jenkins, who writes mysteries, and a guy who was hungover and passed out for most of this. And then a guy named Rudy, and a guy who ends up dying. What's his name? Don. So these are the cast of characters. The mystery is kind of the fun part. They wake up, they're alone on this plane, it's on autopilot. Luckily Brian is there. They can't figure out what happened. There's still food. The pilots are gone, but they had half-eaten food sitting right there, so it's kind of like a ghost ship situation. There are weird things left behind, people's fillings, surgical pins that were inside people are now laying on seats, eyeglasses, watches. There's just an array of things that did not go with the people when they disappeared. So no one is answering Brian when he tries to raise flight control on the radio. And that is alarming because there should have been someone somewhere able to respond and help them, but there's nothing. So we get the sense that, you know, it's the whole unraveling the mystery, which it is fun. They decide to reroute to Bangor, Maine in order to have a better landing. For some reason, the Boston airport is going to be too busy, stuff like that. When Robert Jenkins is kind of trying to figure out what has gone on in this situation, he says, quote, "Let us say that some shadowy government organization like the shop has decided to carry out an experiment and we are the test subjects," on page 54. So again, reference to the shop, which we first saw in Firestarter. I like when Stephen King brings that kind of stuff back in. We find out a little more about Craig, and his dad was really hard to please, and he just never was happy with anything Craig did. It was like he expected greatness. He didn't... Anything that Craig did, it had to be perfect. Otherwise, he was a failure. So he was wound up so tightly as a child, and it only got worse as he got older, and now he's a businessman, and he has kind of imploded, and he is going to Boston to give a presentation about kind of a self-sabotaging thing that he did, where he was buying up a whole bunch of bonds and things like that, and he told everyone that he knew what he was doing, but he didn't know what he was doing, and he intentionally kept going on because he wanted to fail, and he wanted to get caught and be in trouble. He wanted everything to kind of come to a head. So that's why he's so hell-bent on getting to Boston. His calming mechanism is ripping paper into long strips. That calms him down. He zones out. He's able to kind of relax a little bit if he has paper to shred. They get to the airport. The airport is deserted. There's nothing there. There's just no one is there. And Dinah, the blind child, she says that she feels something is wrong. Quote, "But grown-ups did not believe children, especially not blind children, even more especially not blind girl children," page 89, which seemed really, I don't know, the way he threw that in there kind of annoyed me. It's so self-pitying, and it took me out of the story for a bit. So we're in this strange airport. There's no, the sound is kind of muffled down. There's no taste to things. Everything is just flat. And it's very strange, but Craig doesn't really register that things are bizarre. He's still in the mindset of, I've got to get to Boston. No matter what, I've got to get there. And he starts thinking about what his dad told him. The Langoliers come after lazy people and eat them up. Craig ends up finding a gun. He takes Bethany hostage and says, "I'm going to shoot her unless you get me to Boston immediately." And luckily, the gun doesn't work. So they manage to tie Craig up and disarm him. And he's just totally insane. He's, thinking about the Langoliers and how he doesn't want them to get him, and he has to get to his meeting, and he has completely lost the plot. So Jenkins has this theory that they have discovered a time rip, their plane went through it, and they are lost. And he says, quote, "I think we've gone into the past and discovered the unlovely truth of time travel. You can't appear in the Texas State School Book Depository on November 22nd, 1963, and put a stop to the Kennedy assassination," page 127, which is lovely because there is the colonel that became 11/22/63. I love that book. That's a great Stephen King book, and I'm sure he has thought about that scenario, and he obviously wrote it out here, and it's handled so well, the time travel aspect in that book. I really look forward to reading it again. I've only read it a couple times, but I love it. So everyone's trying to prepare for their departure. They figure they have to leave because they're hearing noises, which Craig is convinced is the Langoliers, and it's like a crackling electricity noise. Craig undoes his bonds, and he manages to get a knife, and he stabs Dinah right in the chest. So there's a whole crazy scene where Nick and Laurel have to try and save Dinah from bleeding out. Craig has disappeared. People go off looking for a stretcher to get Dinah onto the airplane so that they can leave. They're going to leave Craig behind. Brian reprograms the plane so that they can go back the way they came because they figure they have to get back through this time rip. They have to refuel the plane, take off, and head into this anomaly so that they can return, hopefully, to their normal time. So Dinah almost bleeds out. Albert and Don go looking for a stretcher. They run into Craig. He was hiding in an office in the dark. He ambushes them, kills Don. Albert has a toaster and a tablecloth, and he swings it at Craig, and he keeps hitting him, and he almost kills him. Now the Langoliers are coming. We can hear their noise. Everyone can hear the noise now, not just Dinah. And it's heading toward them. We get a weird description of the Langoliers. They're like these balls that are chaotically bouncing around. They have faces underneath a sea of kind of running. Everything is running together, and there are faces underneath it, appearing and disappearing, and these crazy chaotic balls are just bouncing everywhere, and everything that they run over gets kind of eaten up, and behind them is nothingness. So it leaves these strips of just nothingness. It eats up everything. It destroys everything. So Dinah manages to have this psychic connection with Craig, and she tells him that his board meeting is ready to take place, and everyone is just a little bit outside of the runway area. He needs to go that way and check it out and give his presentation. So he goes out there, and the Langoliers are distracted by him allowing the people in the plane to escape. So Craig gets defooted, I guess. The Langoliers bounce around and roll over his feet, and he has no feet, and then they ingest the rest of him, and he's screaming. It's terrible. So they get the plane up. Everything underneath them is just falling apart. It's getting destroyed by the Langoliers, and then the remains are just kind of crumbling in on themselves. So the earth is just disappearing entirely underneath them. They reach the time rip, and it's hypnotically colorful, which reminds me very much of The Raft, the short story, and the like oil slick monster, where it hypnotizes you so that when it eats you, it doesn't feel so bad. So they're almost ready to go into this time rip, and Jenkins remembers the fact that they had all been asleep when they came through, and that's how they survived. Everyone who was awake went missing. So they have to abort their mission. They kind of last minute pull out of this time rip thing that's trying to get them, this almost vortex that's trying to pull them in. And Brian quickly jerks the plane around, and it's chaotic, and all this stuff is falling over. In order for this to work, they decide that someone has to fly the plane through the time rip and die. So Brian manages to lower the air pressure. Can't be him because he has to land the plane once it gets through the time rip. And Nick is the one who ends up volunteering for it. And Brian lowers the air pressure, everyone gets knocked out, and Nick has to fly through the time rip. He disappears, and then everyone comes to. Brian regains control of the plane. They fly back to LA, and there's nothingness. So it looks like it did not succeed. Their experiment was a failure. So basically they land at the airport, they walk around, it feels exactly the same as where they had just been in Boston, and you're kind of wondering, oh, is this going to be just a cycle where they have to, try and get back to their own dimension? As they just kind of stand in the airport, the world pops into existence. About 6 of them survive, I think. Dinah ends up dying. I don't know if I mentioned that. So she dies, Craig dies, and Don dies. So there are about 6 or 7 of them that make it. It's an okay story. I don't love time travel, dimension shifts, portals, that kind of stuff. It actually kind of stresses me out, the idea of time travel and making everything work. Other dimensions, it makes me so uncomfortable, the idea of not being able to get back to your reality. Very stressful. So, let me know what you think of the Langoliers. I'm not a huge fan. I'm more excited about the next story, which is Secret Window, Secret Garden. That one also has a movie, which I saw in college. Johnny Depp was in it. So we've got Secret Window, Secret Garden, like that one. The library policeman, not my favorite. And last will be the sundog, which I actually remember very little about that one.